I trusted my wife completely for 25 years. That trust cost me everything: my business, my family, and my entire understanding of who I really am. When I discovered what she'd been hiding, I realized our whole marriage was a lie. But her biggest mistake? She underestimated what I'd do when I found out. My name is Preston Walsh. I'm 51 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I own Walsh Auto Parts, a business I built from nothing over the past 20 years. Started with one small shop selling used car parts. Now I've got 3 locations and a thriving online operation. My wife Lorraine and I have 4 kids: Jackson, 20, Orion, 18, Elijah, 14, and our little princess Lyra, 10. Or at least, that's what I believed until my world came tumbling down. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. Lorraine was getting ready for work, standing in front of our bedroom mirror applying lipstick with more care than usual. She worked as an office manager at a dental practice downtown. Same job for 12 years. Reliable, steady, boring, or so I thought. "I'll be late tonight," Lorraine said, not meeting my eyes in the mirror. "We're having a staff meeting about the new computer system." I was tying my work boots, getting ready to head to the shop. "How late?" She shrugged, still focused on her reflection. "Could be 9, maybe 10. Don't wait up." Something in her tone bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Lorraine had always been straightforward, never one to sugarcoat things. But lately, there'd been a distance between us. She seemed distracted, always on her phone, taking calls in other rooms. "Want to pick up dinner for the kids?" I asked. "Sure, whatever." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "Oh, and Preston, I might need to work this Saturday too. Dr. Reynolds wants to reorganize the entire filing system." That's when it hit me. Dr. Reynolds had retired 6 months ago. I stood there in our bedroom, listening to her car pull out of the driveway, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. Lorraine never got details wrong. She had a memory like a steel trap, could remember every appointment, every school event, every anniversary. She didn't make mistakes like that, unless she was lying. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was being paranoid. But throughout the day at the shop, while I was pricing inventory and dealing with customers, that nagging feeling wouldn't go away. When Jimmy, my assistant manager, asked if I was okay, I realized I'd been staring at the same invoice for 10 minutes. That evening, I picked up pizza for the kids like I'd promised. Jackson was in his room, probably gaming with his friends. Orion was at basketball practice. Elijah was doing homework at the kitchen table, and Lyra was watching cartoons in the living room. "Where's Mom?" Elijah asked as I set the pizza boxes down. "Working late," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. "Staff meeting." Lyra looked up from her show. "Daddy, why does Mommy work so much now?" Out of the mouths of babes. Even our 10-year-old had noticed the change. "She's just busy, sweetheart," I said, but the words felt hollow. At 11:30 that night, Lorraine still wasn't home. I called her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything at the shop. Every time a customer walked in, every time the phone rang, my mind drifted back to Lorraine's lie about Dr. Reynolds. I kept telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation, but the more I thought about it, the more things didn't add up. Around lunchtime, I decided to do something I'd never done in 25 years of marriage. I drove to Lorraine's workplace. The dental practice was in a small strip mall downtown. I've been there plenty of times over the years, dropping off forgotten lunches or picking up Lorraine when her car was in the shop. I knew the staff, knew the routine. I parked across the street and waited. At exactly noon, Lorraine walked out of the building, but instead of heading to the sandwich shop next door like she usually did, she got in her car and drove off. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding like I was some kind of stalker. She drove to the other side of town, to a restaurant I'd never heard of called Giuseppe's. Upscale place, the kind with valet parking and cloth napkins. Not the sort of place Lorraine would go for a quick lunch break. I parked down the street and watched as she walked inside. 10 minutes later, a man approached the entrance. Tall, well-dressed, around my age. Something about the way he carried himself, confident and assured, made my stomach twist. I sat there for an hour and a half. When they finally came out together, Lorraine was laughing at something he'd said, touching his arm in a way that made my blood run cold. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months. The man walked her to her car, and they stood there talking for another few minutes. He leaned down and kissed her cheek before she got in and drove away. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That afternoon back at the shop, I kept making mistakes. Jimmy had to point out that I'd entered the wrong prices on 3 different invoices. When he asked if everything was okay, I just told him I had a headache. But the headache was nothing compared to the sick feeling in my stomach. When I got home that evening, Lorraine was in the kitchen, starting dinner like nothing had happened. She smiled when she saw me, the same smile she'd given the stranger at lunch. "How was your day?" she asked, chopping vegetables for a salad. "Fine," I said, watching her face carefully. "How was yours?" "Busy. The usual office drama." She didn't even blink when she lied to me. Jackson walked into the kitchen, grabbing a soda from the fridge. At 20, he was taller than me now, with Lorraine's dark hair and my stubborn jawline. "Dad, can I borrow $50?" he asked. "Going out with friends tonight." "Sure, son." I pulled out my wallet, but I was still watching Lorraine. "How's college going?" Jackson shrugged. "It's all right." "Mom, are you working late again tonight?" Lorraine paused in her chopping. "No, just wondering. You've been working a lot lately." Even her 20-year-old had noticed. That's when I realized this wasn't something new. Lorraine had been building up to something for a while, and I'd been too trusting, or too stupid, to see it. That night, after everyone went to bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Lorraine slept peacefully beside me. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like I was sharing a bed with a stranger. The next day, I made a decision that went against every rule of privacy I'd ever believed in. I went through Lorraine's things. I felt like a criminal doing it, but I needed answers. While she was at her staff meeting that evening, I searched our bedroom. Hidden in the back of her jewelry box, I found a business card for Dalton Pierce, real estate development. The edges were worn, like she'd been carrying it around for a while. I recognized the name. Pierce Development had been trying to buy property near my main shop for months. They wanted to build some fancy shopping complex, and they'd made several offers to the landlord. I'd been fighting it because it would hurt my business. All that construction would drive customers away. Now I understood why Lorraine had been so supportive when I told her about the development problems. She'd encouraged me to just sell and find a new location more than once. At the time, I thought she was being practical. I was such an idiot. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Pierce Development's office. Through the window, I could see him, the same man from the restaurant. Tall, silver-haired, probably worth 10 times what I was. Everything I wasn't. But I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Instead, I went to see my accountant, Bob Stevens, who'd been handling my books for 15 years. "Bob, I need you to check something for me," I said, sitting across from his cluttered desk. "Has anyone been accessing my business accounts besides me?" Bob pulled up my files on his computer, frowning as he scrolled through screens of data. After a few minutes, he looked up with concern. "Preston, there have been several inquiries about your financial status over the past 3 months. Someone's been doing due diligence on your business." My blood went cold. "What kind of inquiries?" "The kind you do before making an acquisition offer." "Have you been thinking about selling?" I shook my head. "Who made the inquiries?" Bob hesitated. "Pierce Development. They weren't just trying to buy the property around my shop. They were investigating my entire business, probably planning to squeeze me out completely. And my wife was feeding them information." That evening, I confronted Lorraine directly. She was in the kitchen making dinner when I walked in and placed Dalton Pierce's business card on the counter. "Want to explain this?" I asked. Lorraine glanced at the card, and I watched her face go through several emotions: surprise, fear, then defiance. "Where did you find that?" she asked. "In your jewelry box. Along with this." I placed a receipt from Giuseppe's restaurant on the counter. I'd found it in her purse while she was showering. She straightened up, meeting my eyes for the first time in weeks. "Preston, we need to talk." "Yeah, we do. Starting with how long you've been screwing Dalton Pierce and feeding him information about my business." The mask finally slipped. The guilty, apologetic expression I'd been expecting never came. Instead, Lorraine smiled, cold and calculating. "Longer than you think," she said. That smile told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was planned, calculated, and I'd been played for a fool. "How long?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Lorraine leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing her arms like we were discussing the weather. 2 years, Preston. Maybe longer. 2 years. While I'd been working 16-hour days to build our future, she'd been planning to destroy it. And Pierce wants my business locations, I continued. He wants to develop the whole area. Your little auto parts shops are standing in the way of progress. Little auto parts shops. Like the business that paid for this house, our cars, our kids' clothes, meant nothing. So you decided to help him. I decided to think about our future instead of clinging to the past. Her voice was getting sharper now. That business of yours is small time, Preston. Dalton's offering us a chance at something bigger. Us. I almost laughed. You mean you? I mean our family. Do you know what Dalton's net worth is? What he could do for our kids? Our kids. The words came out harder than I intended. Which kids are you talking about, Lorraine? Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe guilt. But she recovered quickly. What's that supposed to mean? I've been dreading this moment, but now it felt like ripping off a bandage. I know about Jackson. The color drained from her face. Preston, when he needed that blood transfusion after his motorcycle accident last year, the doctor mentioned something about blood types that didn't make sense. I had my doctor run some tests. Lorraine's hands were shaking now, but her voice remained defiant. So what if you're not his biological father? You raised him. You love him. I do love him. But I deserve to know the truth. I stepped closer. Who else, Lorraine? Or Ian? She didn't answer, but the guilt written across her face was confession enough. 20 years of marriage, and I'd been raising another man's children without knowing it. The betrayal cut deeper than any affair could. Get out, I said quietly. Preston, we can work this out. Get out of my house. Now. This is my house too. Not anymore. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. I've already called my lawyer. You have until tomorrow to pack whatever you need. Everything else gets sorted out in court. For the first time since this conversation started, Lorraine looked genuinely shocked. You can't just throw me out. I have rights. So did I. But that didn't stop you from planning to steal my business and destroy my life. She opened her mouth to argue, but footsteps on the stairs made us both turn. Jackson was standing in the doorway, his face pale. How much of that did you hear? I asked him. Enough, he said quietly. Then he looked at his mother with disappointment that broke my heart. Mom, is it true? Lorraine's composure finally shattered. Jackson, honey, I can explain. Is Preston my father or not? The silence stretched between us until Lorraine whispered, No. Jackson nodded slowly, then looked at me. Dad, I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for, son. And I meant it. Biology didn't matter. I'd raised these boys, loved them, been there for every scraped knee and broken heart. That would never change. But my marriage? That was over. After Lorraine left, the house felt different, lighter somehow, despite the pain cutting through my chest. I spent that night in my office, making calls and planning my next moves. 25 years of marriage doesn't end without consequences, and I wasn't about to let her walk away with everything I'd built. The first call was to my lawyer, Frank Rodriguez. We'd gone to high school together, and he'd handled the legal side of my business expansion. Frank, I need a divorce attorney. The best one you know. Preston, what happened? I gave him the basics, the affair, the business sabotage, the paternity revelations. Frank listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. This isn't just a divorce case, Frank said finally. This is fraud, possibly corporate espionage. You need someone who can handle both family law and business litigation. He gave me the name of Sandra Kim, an attorney who specialized in complex divorce cases involving business assets. By 8 the next morning, I was sitting in her downtown office. Sandra was sharp, direct, and didn't waste time on sympathy. Mr. Walsh, based on what you've told me, your wife has committed several crimes. The unauthorized access to business information, the secret bank transfers. We can use all of this. What about the kids? The paternity issue complicates things, but you've been their legal father their entire lives. That carries weight in court. She leaned forward, her expression serious. But I need you to understand something. If we go after her aggressively, she's going to fight back. This could get ugly. It's already ugly, I said. Now I want justice. The next step was securing my business assets. I spent the afternoon at the bank, removing Lorraine's access to all accounts and changing every password and security code. She'd stolen enough from me. It ended now. That evening, Jackson came to see me. He'd been staying at his friend's place since the confrontation, and he looked exhausted. Dad, we need to talk, he said, sitting across from me in the living room. I'm listening, son. I've known for 3 years that you weren't my biological father." The words hit me like a physical blow. Ow, Mom told me. She said if I ever said anything, it would destroy our family. His voice was bitter. She made me promise to keep it secret. 3 years. My 20-year-old son had been carrying this burden for 3 years. "Jackson, I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize, Dad. You didn't do anything wrong." He looked up at me with eyes that seemed older than his 20 years. "She also told me who my real father is." I wasn't sure I wanted to hear this, but I needed to know. "It's Dalton Pierce." The room spun slightly. Pierce wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was Jackson's biological father. This whole business takeover scheme suddenly made more sense. Pierce wasn't just trying to steal my company. He was trying to claim his son. "Does he know?" I asked. "Yeah. Mom's been trying to get me to meet with him, to get to know my real father." Jackson's voice was full of disgust. "She wants me to work for his company after college." The manipulation ran deeper than I'd imagined. Lorraine hadn't just betrayed me. She'd been grooming our son to abandon me for his biological father. "What did you tell her?" Jackson looked me straight in the eye. "I told her that you're my real father. Biology doesn't change 20 years of love and support." I had to fight back tears. This kid, this young man, had more integrity at 20 than his mother had shown in a lifetime. "There's something else, Dad. Something you need to know about Dalton Pierce." Jackson pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages. "Pierce has been texting me for months, trying to set up meetings. But last week, he got more aggressive. The messages were manipulative, playing on father-son emotions, and promising opportunities if Jackson would come home to his real family. But the final message was what made my blood boil. "Tell your mother it's time to move forward with the plan. Preston needs to be out of the picture by the end of the month." I read it twice to make sure I understood. "He's threatening me?" "Dad, I think there's more to this than just taking your business locations. I think they want to destroy you completely." That night, I called Sandra Kim's emergency number. When I read her Pierce's message, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Walsh, this changes everything. We're not just dealing with adultery and fraud anymore. This sounds like conspiracy and possibly intimidation." The next morning, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week ago. I drove to Pierce Development's office, but this time I wasn't going to hide. I was going to walk through the front door and confront the man who'd been destroying my life. Dalton Pierce was exactly what I expected. Polished, confident, the kind of man who'd never worked with his hands or built anything real. He was in his office when I arrived, and his secretary tried to stop me, but I walked past her like she wasn't there. "Mr. Pierce," I said, closing the door behind me. "We need to talk." He looked up from his desk, and I saw a recognition flash in his eyes. He knew exactly who I was. "Mr. Walsh, I wondered when you'd show up. I'll bet you did. Especially after you've been sleeping with my wife and threatening me through my son." Pierce leaned back in his expensive chair, completely unruffled. "Threatening you? I think there's been a misunderstanding." I pulled out my phone and read his text message aloud. Pierce's expression didn't change, but I caught a slight tightening around his eyes. "That was taken out of context," he said. "Really? What context makes threatening someone acceptable?" "I wasn't threatening you, Preston. I was stating a business reality." He stood up and walked to his window, overlooking the city. "Your auto part shops are standing in the way of a $100 million development project. That land is worth 10 times what you're making from it. So you decided to steal it through my wife." He turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw his real face, cold, calculating, ruthless. "I decided to acquire it through legitimate business channels. If your wife chose to be helpful in that process, that's between you and her. And if she chose to help you destroy my marriage, is that just business too?" Pierce smiled, and it was the most arrogant expression I'd ever seen. "Preston, your marriage was already over. You just didn't know it yet. Lorraine came to me, not the other way around." The implication hit me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just about business or even just about the affair. Lorraine had approached Pierce with a plan to destroy me. How long has this been going on? Long enough for us to realize we have mutual interests. She wants out a dead-end marriage, and I want that land. It's a win-win situation. Except for me. "Well," Pierce said with another cold smile, "you can't win them all." I wanted to punch him. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to wipe that smirk off his face. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording app I'd been running since I walked into his office. Pierce's smile faltered. You recorded our conversation? Every word, including the part where you admitted to conspiring with my wife to steal my business. For the first time since I'd met him, Dalton Pierce looked worried. 2 weeks after recording Pierce's confession, Sandra Kim called with an opportunity one couldn't pass up. Preston, there's a Chamber of Commerce networking event this Friday. Both Pierce and Lorraine will be there. It's the kind of high-profile gathering where they want to be seen together. What are you suggesting? We serve them the divorce papers and fraud charges publicly. Maximum impact, minimum chance for them to coordinate their response. But I had a better idea. Sandra, what if we brought Natasha Pierce to the party? There was silence on the other end. Pierce's wife? How would that help? Because she doesn't know about the affair. I checked. She's been posting happy family photos on social media all month. Pierce has been playing her just like Lorraine played me. I'd spent days tracking down Natasha Pierce through social media and mutual connections. She was a kindergarten teacher, involved in charity work, completely unaware that her husband was destroying families while building his business empire. Meeting her was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. We sat in a quiet diner outside town while I showed her the evidence. Photographs of Pierce and Lorraine together, bank records showing money transfers, copies of their text messages. Natasha's hand shook as she looked through the file. How long? She whispered. At least 2 years that I know of. She was quiet for several minutes, staring at a photo of her husband kissing my wife. When she finally looked up, her eyes were dry but fierce. What do you want me to do? Come to the chamber event with me. Let's show them what it feels like to be ambushed. The night of the party, Natasha looked stunning in a navy dress that complemented her silver hair. We walked into the hotel ballroom arm in arm, and I watched as heads turned. Not because they recognized us, but because we looked like a power couple. I spotted Lorraine and Pierce near the bar, laughing with a group of local business owners. Lorraine was wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. She looked radiant, completely at ease, like she belonged in Pierce's wealthy world. Then she saw me. The smile froze on her face. Her eyes darted to Natasha, confusion replacing confidence. Pierce noticed her change in expression and turned toward us. When he saw his wife on my arm, his face went white. We walked straight to them, the crowd parting as if they sensed the coming storm. Dalton, Natasha said sweetly, I don't think you've met Preston Walsh. He's been telling me the most interesting stories about your business relationship with his wife. The group around them had gone silent, sensing drama, but not understanding its source. Lorraine found her voice first. Natasha, what are you doing here? Learning about my husband's extracurricular activities, Natasha replied. Preston has been very educational. Pierce stepped forward, his face a mask of controlled panic. Natasha, we should talk privately. Oh no, Dalton. I think we should talk right here, in front of all your business associates. Natasha's voice carried across the nearby tables. I'd love to hear you explain how you've been sleeping with this woman while trying to steal her husband's business. The silence that followed was deafening. Then whispers started, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Everyone, I said, raising my voice, I'd like you to meet my wife's lover and business partner in fraud. Perhaps someone here can explain why the Chamber of Commerce allows criminals as members. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Within hours of the party, Pierce's business reputation was in ruins. By Monday morning, 3 major clients had canceled contracts, and the Chamber of Commerce had launched an ethics investigation. But the real victory came when Pierce made a desperate mistake. He showed up at my house Tuesday evening, furious and reckless. I was in my garage working on an old engine when he stormed in. You've destroyed everything, Pierce snarled. 20 years of building my reputation, gone because you couldn't handle losing your wife. I set down my wrench and faced him calmly. I didn't destroy anything, Dalton. I just exposed what you'd already built on lies. Lorraine loves me. We're going to be together whether you like it or not. Where is she now? Pierce's expression faltered. Since the party, Lorraine had been staying at her sister's house, refusing to see him. Natasha had filed for divorce immediately, and Pierce was facing fraud charges. His perfect plan was falling apart. She's scared, he said. Once things calm down. She's not scared. She's smart enough to know you're a sinking ship. Pierce stepped closer, his fists clenched. You think you've won? I'll destroy your pathetic little business and take those boys away from you. They're my sons, not yours. That was his final mistake. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording app. You just confessed to planning to steal my business and kidnap my children. You want to call the police, or should I? Pierce's face went pale as he realized what he'd done. You can't use that in court. Actually, I can. You're on my property, threatening me. This conversation is completely legal. Within minutes, police cars were pulling into my driveway. I'd already sent copies of Pierce's threats to Sandra Kim and the district attorney. Pierce was arrested for criminal threatening and conspiracy. As they led him away in handcuffs, he screamed at me. This isn't over, but was. 2 days later, Lorraine called, begging to come home. She'd heard about Pierce's arrest and realized her sugar daddy wasn't going to save her from the fraud charges. Preston, we can work this out, she pleaded over the phone. I made mistakes, but we can start over. No, Lorraine, we can't. Think about the children. I am thinking about them. That's why I'm protecting them from you. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Lorraine lost everything. The house, her share of the business, most of her custody rights. Pierce went to prison for fraud and conspiracy. His development company collapsed, and the land he'd wanted so desperately was eventually sold to a family entertainment center. Jackson chose to keep my last name and continued calling me Dad. Orion, when he learned the truth about his paternity, made the same choice. Blood doesn't make a family. Love and commitment do. 6 months later, I was rebuilding my business and my life. The boys were thriving, and little Lyra was getting counseling to help her process everything that had happened. As for Natasha Pierce, she and I had become unlikely friends. Two people who'd survived betrayal and come out stronger. Sometimes justice really does prevail. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I stood in the lobby of my newest auto parts location, the Fourth Walsh Auto Parts store. Business had exploded after the Pierce scandal. Apparently, people respected a man who fought back against corruption. Jackson walked through the door, carrying coffee for both of us. At 21, he decided to skip his final semester of college to help expand the business. Dad, the contractor says the Memphis location will be ready next month, he said, handing me the cup. You sure you want to manage that store? It's a big responsibility. Jackson smiled, the same smile that had melted my heart when he was 5 years old. You taught me everything I know about business and integrity. I'm ready. Biology meant nothing. This young man was my son in every way that mattered. Orion had made the same choice after learning the truth about his parentage. Now 18, he was studying business at the local community college while working part-time at the main store. He'd legally changed his last name to Walsh, just like Jackson had. Mr. Walsh, a woman's voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see a reporter from the local business journal. Could I get a few minutes for an interview about your expansion? Of course. How does it feel to go from nearly losing everything to building a regional chain? I thought about Pierce, now serving 8 years in federal prison. About Lorraine, working at a discount store and living in a one-bedroom apartment, stripped of everything she tried to steal. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing, I said. My wife's betrayal forced me to become the man I should have been all along. And your sons? How are they handling everything? They're thriving. Turns out, being raised by someone who loves them matters more than sharing DNA. That evening, Natasha Pierce stopped by the house. Over the past year, she'd become one of my closest friends, someone who understood betrayal and rebuilding. How was the interview? She asked, joining me on the back porch where I was grilling dinner for the kids. Good. They wanted to know the secret to my success. What did you tell them? That sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what actually matters. Natasha nodded, watching Elijah and Lyra play in the backyard. Both kids had adjusted well to the divorce, especially after learning the truth about their mother's crimes. Preston, can I ask you something personal? Shoot. Do you ever regret fighting back? Part of me wonders if it would have been easier to just let Dalton have his affair and quietly divorce. I considered the question seriously. If I'd done that, he'd still be out there destroying other families. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't about what's easier for you. As the sun set over our peaceful neighborhood, I realized something profound. I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I protected my children and helped stop a criminal. Real strength isn't about never getting knocked down. It's about how you get back up. 2 years later, I received a phone call that brought everything full circle. Mr. Walsh, This is Detective Sarah Manning with the State Police. We're investigating a fraud case, and your name came up as someone who might be willing to help. What kind of help? We have a businessman whose wife has been stealing money and feeding information to competitors. The situation is almost identical to what you went through with Pierce. Would you be willing to speak with the victim? Within a week, I was sitting across from Robert Shun, a restaurant owner whose wife had been sabotaging his business for over a year. The pain in his eyes was familiar, the same devastation I'd felt when I first discovered Lorraine's betrayal. How do you get through it? He asked. One day at a time, and by remembering that their choices don't define your worth. Over the following months, I helped Robert gather evidence and build a case against his wife and her accomplices. The experience reminded me why I'd fought so hard, not just for my own family, but for all the families that criminals like Pierce and Lorraine destroy. Today, Walsh Auto Parts has 8 locations across 3 states. Jackson runs the Memphis store and is engaged to a wonderful girl he met in college. Orion is finishing his business degree and planning to open our first location in Arkansas. Elijah, now 16, works weekends at the main store and shows the same work ethic that built this business. Lyra, 13, wants to be a lawyer, inspired, she says, by watching her dad fight for justice. As for Lorraine, she remarried last year, a man 20 years older who doesn't know about her criminal history. I don't wish her ill, but I don't waste time thinking about her either. Natasha and I remain close friends. She started dating a teacher from her school, a good man who appreciates what she survived. Sometimes healing means learning to trust again. The business journal that interviewed me 2 years ago recently named Walsh Auto Parts Small Business of the Year. During my acceptance speech, I looked out at an audience full of entrepreneurs and community leaders. Success isn't measured by how much money you make, I told them. It's measured by how you respond when everything goes wrong. Do you give up, or do you fight back? Do you let criminals win, or do you protect the people who depend on you? After the ceremony, a young businessman approached me. His wife had been acting strange lately, and he suspected infidelity. Mr. Walsh, what would you do in my situation? I handed him my business card. Call me tomorrow. Let's talk. Because some fights are worth having, and some victories are worth sharing. The business I almost lost is now my legacy. The family that was nearly destroyed is stronger than ever. And the man who almost broke me ended up making me unbreakable. Sometimes justice really does prevail.